There are towns that forget their sins. Black Hollow was not one of them. The wind never moved cleanly through its streets. It scraped against the old church steeple and hissed along the cracked windows of abandoned storefronts as if something were breathing behind the walls. The people who remained there learned to speak softly after dusk. They had long ago stopped asking why. The first scream came on a Thursday night. Grace Whitmore had just finished washing the dishes when the house fell unnaturally still. The refrigerator's hum died mid-note. The kitchen clock stopped at 9:17. Even the dog, restless and old, lowered itself to the floor and whimpered into its paws. Then came the sound from upstairs. Not a cry exactly. A wet, choking gasp, followed by a voice that did not belong to her daughter. Grace dropped the plate. It shattered, porcelain skittering across the tile like broken teeth. She ran up the stairs two at a time. "Emma," she called. The hallway felt longer than usual. The air carried a metallic scent, like pennies and rain. Emma's bedroom door stood open. Inside, the curtains thrashed though the window was shut. The room pulsed with a faint, unnatural vibration, as if something large were moving just beyond sight. Emma sat upright in her bed, spine rigid, eyes wide and unblinking. Her pupils were too large. They swallowed the blue. "Mom," Emma whispered. Grace rushed forward, but something in the girl's posture stopped her. Emma's head tilted slowly, too slowly, like a hinge rusted and forced. "Mom," the voice repeated. It wasn't layered. It wasn't theatrical. It was worse. It was precise. Calm. As though the mouth had practiced the word. Grace knelt beside the bed. "Honey, what's wrong?" Emma's lips parted. A smile stretched across her face, but the muscles around her eyes didn't move. "He's here," she said. The lights burst. The bulb overhead shattered in a small explosion. Glass rained down. Grace screamed and covered her head. When she looked up again, Emma was standing on the mattress. Standing. Without bending her knees. Her bare feet pressed flat against the air as if gravity had reconsidered its loyalty. Grace stumbled backward. "Emma." The girl's gaze shifted, not to her mother, but toward the darkened hallway. Toward something unseen. "He tore it," Emma whispered. And then she collapsed. Dr. Lily Turner received the call 2 days later. She hadn't planned to return to Black Hollow. She'd spent 10 years building distance. Geographical and emotional, from that place. Her lectures at Columbia were measured and rational. Her interviews were clinical. She was known for dismantling hauntings with science and psychology. She did not speak about bloodlines. Grace's voice trembled over the phone. "My daughter isn't sick," she insisted. "It's not epilepsy. It's not psychosis. She says things she shouldn't know. She speaks languages." Lily closed her eyes. "And when she looks at me," Grace continued, voice breaking, "it's like she's measuring me." Silence pressed between them. "Please," Grace whispered. "People say you understand these things." Lily's reflection stared back at her from the dark window of her office. For a moment, she thought she saw someone standing just behind her shoulder. She did not turn. "I'll come," she said. The road into Black Hollow had not improved with time. Fog rolled low across the pavement, swallowing headlights and bending distance. Lily gripped the steering wheel tighter than she meant to. Every mile marker felt familiar. Every bend in the road felt rehearsed. She told herself she had left this behind. But memory is patient. As she passed the rusted welcome sign, "Welcome to Black Hollow, population 1943, the temperature inside the car dropped abruptly. The digital display blinked. Then went black. Her phone lost signal. Her radio began emitting a low, steady static. Lily exhaled slowly. Coincidence, she murmured. The static shifted. Beneath it, faint but distinct, was whispering. She slammed the radio off. The silence afterward felt worse. Father John Mallory had not slept in 3 nights. The Church of St. Bartholomew stood at the town's highest point, its stone walls older than any other structure in Black Hollow. John sat alone in the pews, collar loosened, staring at the altar. The candles flickered without draft. 2 parishioners had reported seeing figures walking across the cemetery after midnight, figures that did not disturb the frost. A third claimed her dead husband had stood at the foot of her bed and smiled. John had dismissed it at first. Grief is powerful. But then the confessional door had slammed shut on its own. And from inside the booth, a voice had begun reciting scripture backward. He had recognized the voice. It was his own. John pressed his palms together and bowed his head. "Test me," he whispered. "But do not abandon me." The church groaned. A crack split across the plaster above the altar, thin at first, then widening like a vein. Dust rained down. From somewhere beneath the floorboards came a low, resonant knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. John stood. "Who's there?" he demanded. The knocking stopped. In its place came breathing. Not loud. Just close. Too close. Lily arrived at Grace's house just before dusk. The Whitmore home sat near the edge of town, backed by a stretch of forest that swallowed light even at noon. The paint peeled from its siding. The porch sagged. Grace opened the door before Lily could knock. Her face looked thinner than it had on the university alumni website Lily had searched. "She's upstairs," Grace said without greeting. Lily stepped inside. The air was wrong. Not cold exactly, just dense. Heavy. As though the house were holding something in. "Tell me everything," Lily said. Grace spoke in fragments as they climbed the stairs. The levitation, the whispering, the languages, the scratches appearing on Emma's arms in patterns that resembled symbols. "And last night," Grace said, voice shaking. "She told me something." They stopped outside Emma's bedroom. "What did she say?" Lily asked. Grace swallowed. "She said you were coming." Lily felt her pulse stutter. "I never told her." The bedroom door creaked open. Emma sat on the floor, drawing on the wood with something dark. Not crayon. Not marker. Blood. Symbols covered the boards in looping, ancient shapes. They spiraled outward from her small hands. Emma looked up slowly. Her eyes were clear. Too clear. "Hello, Lily," she said. "Not, Dr. Turner." "Not, ma'am." "Just Lily." The girl smiled. And behind her, the air shimmered faintly, as if something thin and invisible had split. As if a veil had been torn. And something had stepped through. The symbols on the bedroom floor were not random. Lily knelt slowly, careful not to disturb the spirals of drying blood. The lines were deliberate, looped, intersecting, symmetrical in a way that suggested intent rather than frenzy. She had seen similar patterns before. Not in textbooks. Not in field cases. In her grandmother's journal. Emma watched her with an attentiveness that felt older than childhood. "Did you draw these?" Lily asked evenly. Emma's head tilted. She doesn't remember drawing. The shift in pronoun was subtle. Grace made a strangled sound behind them. "Emma, sweetheart, talk to me." Emma's eyes flicked toward her mother. For a moment something like irritation crossed her face, then it smoothed out again. "She is tired," Emma said calmly. "You keep asking her to fight." Lily stood. "Who are you?" she asked. Emma smiled faintly. "You know." The temperature dropped several degrees. Lily felt it in her teeth. Behind Emma, the air wavered again. Like heat distortion rising from asphalt, but colder. Thinner. As if space itself were strained and fraying. Lily forced her voice steady. How long have you been here? Emma's gaze sharpened. The innocence vanished completely. Longer than you think, the voice said. The bedroom door slammed shut. Grace screamed. The walls vibrated with a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. The blood symbols began to darken, the red turning almost black as if something were drawing heat from them. Lily stepped forward, heart hammering. Stop this. Emma's body jerked once, hard enough to snap her spine backward at an unnatural angle. A crack echoed through the room. Grace lunged forward, but Lily caught her. Don't touch her. Emma rose slowly, not standing this time, but lifting several inches off the ground. Her hair floated around her face as if suspended underwater. He tore it, Emma whispered again. You felt it when you crossed the line. Lily's stomach clenched. The town boundary. The welcome sign. The static on the radio. Something had been waiting. Who tore it? Lily demanded. Emma's smile widened. Your blood did. The windows shattered inward. Glass exploded across the room in a storm of fragments. Grace collapsed to the floor, shielding her head. Lily threw her arm across her face. When the sound finally stopped, Emma dropped. Her body hit the floor hard, too hard, and lay still. Silence rushed in, suffocating and absolute. Father John arrived 20 minutes later. He had been called not by Grace, but by the church bell. It had begun ringing on its own. John stood in the Whitmore living room, collar back in place, eyes dark with exhaustion. He took in the broken windows, the smell of copper in the air, the way the house felt slightly off, as though the geometry no longer aligned. You came back, he said quietly to Lily. She nodded once. I didn't intend to. You never do. There was history in his tone. Shared knowledge. Neither addressed it. Grace sat beside Emma on the couch. The girl appeared unconscious now, breathing shallow but steady. The symbols on the bedroom floor had dried completely. John stepped closer to Emma and began murmuring Latin under his breath. Her eyelids fluttered. At the third line of prayer, her mouth opened. She laughed. It was not loud. It was intimate. John's voice faltered. Emma's eyes snapped open, fully black now, the whites gone entirely. You abandoned him, she said to John. The priest froze. Lily felt the shift immediately. The room narrowed around them. Emma's head turned slowly toward Lily. And you buried him. Lily's pulse roared in her ears. John steadied himself. In the name of Jesus Christ. Emma screamed. The sound was not human. It tore through the walls and seemed to vibrate inside their skulls. The lights flickered violently. The ceiling above them cracked, plaster splitting in jagged veins. John staggered back, gripping his crucifix. Emma's voice lowered to a whisper. Names have no power. Here. The house shuddered. Then, abruptly, Emma's body went limp again. Her eyes returned to blue. She blinked slowly. Mom, she whispered weakly. Grace collapsed over her daughter, sobbing. John exhaled shakily. This isn't a simple possession. Lily's face had gone pale. No, she said. It isn't. She turned toward the hallway. Something opened, she continued. Not just inside her. Inside the town. John studied her carefully. You believe a gate has been breached. I believe something was invited. The words tasted bitter. Grace looked up, panic rising again. Invited? By who? Lily did not answer immediately. Because she already knew the possibility. Her family had been among the founding bloodlines of Black Hollow. In the 1800s, records spoke of a ritual performed in secret, a summoning meant to grant protection from famine and plague. The documents had been dismissed as hysteria. But her grandmother had believed. And before she died, she had warned Lily. When the veil thins, our blood will feel it first. Lily swallowed. There was a ritual, she said carefully. Long ago. Something that may not have been closed properly. John's eyes darkened. You think this is connected to that? I think it's connected to me. The room fell silent again. Outside, the wind began to rise. Later that night, Lily stood alone in the backyard. The forest loomed close, trees packed tight as ribs. No insects chirped. No owls called. The world felt paused. She stepped closer to the tree line. The air shifted. A faint seam shimmered between two oaks, barely visible, like a vertical ripple in glass. It extended upward, vanishing into darkness. Her breath caught. The veil. Thin. Fragile. Torn. From the other side came a sound she could not fully interpret. Not speech. Not growling. Something like distant chanting, layered and old. The seam widened slightly as she watched. Just enough for a shadow to press against it. Not pushing through. Testing. Lily took a slow step back. The shadow mirrored her movement. Her heart thudded violently. You're not invited, she whispered. The shadow stilled. Then, slowly, deliberately, it raised a hand. And pressed its palm flat against the tear. The surface rippled. A faint imprint formed, 5 elongated fingers. Waiting. Behind her, the back door creaked open. Lily? John's voice called. She turned for half a second. When she looked back, the seam was gone. The forest stood still and empty. But on the bark of the nearest tree, carved deep into the wood, was a single word. Turner. The veil had been torn. And something on the other side knew her name. By morning, Black Hollow felt altered in ways too subtle to measure and too profound to ignore. Dogs would not leave their porches. Birds avoided the power lines. The sky hung low and gray, pressing down like a lid. People moved quickly along the sidewalks, eyes lowered, conversations cut short. Lily had not slept. She sat at Grace's kitchen table with her grandmother's journal open before her. The leather binding was cracked, the pages thin and brittle. She had sworn never to bring it back here. Now it lay between her hands like an accusation. John stood at the sink, staring out the window toward the tree line. He had removed his collar. Without it, he looked less like a priest and more like a man struggling to remember why he once believed. Grace hovered near the doorway, unable to sit, unable to leave Emma's side for long. Read it, John said quietly. Lily inhaled and turned to a marked page. September 18, 1873. The veil is not a wall but a membrane. It separates breath from echo. When weakened, both sides bleed. Her throat tightened. We called to it in hunger. We asked for preservation. We did not ask what it would take. Grace shook her head. What does that mean? It means, Lily said carefully, they performed an invocation. Not to a spirit. Not to a ghost. John finished the thought. To something older. Lily nodded. The journal continued. The entity answered. It promised protection if our blood sealed the threshold. A covenant of lineage. The firstborn of every generation bound as anchor. Grace's face drained of color. Firstborn, she whispered. Emma was her only child. Lily closed the journal. My family participated in that ritual. The Turners were among the signatories. John turned slowly. Then why is the Whitmore child afflicted? Because bloodlines intertwined, Lily said. Black Hollow was small. Marriages overlapped. Covenants spread. Grace backed into the wall. You're saying this thing belongs to us? No, Lily replied. I'm saying we belong to it. The house creaked. Upstairs, a door slammed. Grace bolted toward the staircase. They found Emma standing at her bedroom mirror. Not touching it. Staring. Her reflection did not move. Lily felt the air thin again. Emma, she said gently. The girl did not respond. Her reflection, however, smiled. Not wide. Not exaggerated. Just enough. Grace gasped. Why isn't it? The mirror cracked down the center. Emma blinked. Her reflection blinked a full second later. Then the glass darkened. A second figure appeared behind the reflection. Tall. Indistinct. Its outline wavered like smoke held in human shape. Emma spoke without turning. It remembers the promise. John stepped forward, gripping his crucifix again. In the name of. The mirror shattered outward. Fragments flew past them but did not cut. They hung in the air for a suspended second before clattering harmlessly to the floor. Emma collapsed. Again. Grace caught her this time. John looked at Lily. It's escalating. Yes, she said. Because it's stabilizing. He frowned. Stabilizing? The veil isn't just torn, Lily said. It's being held open. As if in response, the floor trembled. From beneath the house came a low vibration, steady and rhythmic. Not random. Not structural. Intentional. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Grace covered her mouth. John's face went pale. That pattern. It's liturgical, Lily whispered. A mockery of the Trinity. The knocking grew louder. The kitchen cabinets rattled. Plates clinked together. A thin crack formed along the ceiling above them. Emma's eyes flew open. She gasped sharply, as if surfacing from deep water. It's under us, she whispered hoarsely. It's waiting. The floorboards buckled. A dark line split across the living room floor like a vein opening. Cold air rushed upward from the fracture. And with it. Whispers. Layered. Overlapping. Dozens of voices speaking in tones too low to fully hear. John dropped to his knees and began praying aloud, voice shaking but steady. Lily grabbed Grace. We need to leave. Now. But as they reached the front door, it slammed shut on its own. The locks twisted. The windows fogged black. The whispers rose in volume, forming something almost comprehensible. A phrase. Repeated. Blood keeps the gate. Emma stood again. Not lifted this time. Standing normally. Too normally. Her small hand reached toward Lily. You shouldn't have come back, she said, not with cruelty, but with something like sorrow. Lily felt tears prick her eyes despite herself. I had to. Emma's gaze softened briefly. Then hardened. It doesn't want you here, she said. It wants you inside. The fracture in the floor widened. From the darkness below, something shifted. A shape pressed upward, distorting the wood from beneath as though a massive hand were pushing against thin skin. Grace screamed. The board split. A fissure opened wide enough to reveal nothing but depth. Not dirt. Not foundation. Depth. Endless and black. Wind roared up from the void, carrying the stench of sulfur and rot. John shouted over the noise, "Lily, what did your grandmother say about closing it?" Lily's mind raced. She saw the page clearly. The covenant can be undone only by the blood that sealed it. But the cost will not be small. Her pulse thundered. "It requires a reversal," she said. "A renunciation of the oath." "How?" Grace cried. Lily looked at Emma. At the child trembling at the edge of the widening chasm. At the shadow now rising slowly within it. "I have to claim it," Lily said quietly. John stared at her. "Claim what?" "The anchor." The shadow surged upward. A towering silhouette of horns and shifting limbs began to emerge from the darkness, pressing against the thin boundary of the room like a body forcing through torn fabric. The house groaned violently. Lily stepped forward. "If it wants my blood," she whispered, voice steady now, "it can have it." The shadow paused. The whispers ceased. Every sound in the house collapsed into stillness. The shape leaned closer. Close enough that Lily could feel its presence against her skin, cold and ancient. A voice filled the room. Not from Emma. Not from below. From everywhere. "You return willingly." Lily swallowed. "Yes." The air vibrated. "And you remember." She nodded once. The shadow recoiled slightly, almost amused. "Then come." The floor beneath Lily's feet cracked. Darkness rushed upward. And swallowed her whole. Falling did not feel like movement. It felt like subtraction. Lily did not plunge so much as unravel, each layer of sound, light, and gravity peeling away until there was only awareness suspended in something dense and unlit. She tried to scream, but there was no air to carry it. Then the ground met her. Not with impact. With acceptance. She stood upright in a place that resembled Black Hollow, but emptied of warmth and history. Buildings sagged inward at impossible angles. Windows reflected nothing. The sky hung without depth, a bruised expanse that did not change. The veil, she realized, was not a door. It was a thinning. And she had stepped into the thinner side. A church stood at the center of the hollow, St. Bartholomew's, but its steeple was broken, its bell twisted like melted bone. The cemetery stones leaned crooked, names eroded as though time had been selective. She moved forward carefully. The air carried a low hum, not mechanical but organic. Like distant chanting submerged beneath water. As she passed the graveyard gate, she saw the names clearly. Turner. Whitmore. Mallory. Line after line of intertwined blood. Every generation represented. Every firstborn marked with a faint carving beneath the dates, a small sigil shaped like a tear. The anchor. The covenant had not bound one family. It had braided them together. Recognition is the first surrender. The voice did not echo. It simply arrived. Lily turned. The figure stood near the church entrance, tall, draped in shadow that moved independent of any light source. Its shape resisted definition. Horns seemed to curve from its skull one moment, then vanish the next. Its eyes were not visible, yet she felt their focus precisely. "You call yourself devil," Lily said, forcing steadiness into her voice. The figure tilted its head slightly. "You call me that." The correction was gentle. "You were invited," it continued. "Named. Federal." Images flooded her mind, flickering impressions of 19th-century townsfolk kneeling. In a forest clearing, hands linked, chanting words borrowed from older languages. Fear in their faces. Desperation. Her grandmother among them, much younger. A blade cutting a palm. Blood spilling into a shallow pit carved into earth. The pit widening. Opening. You promised protection, Lily whispered. And delivered it, the entity replied. The famine ended. The sickness receded. The town endured. At a cost. All preservation carries cost. The church doors creaked open behind it. Inside, the altar was replaced with a circular stone etched with the same sigils Emma had drawn. The stone pulsed faintly, as if alive. The veil is not meant to remain closed, the entity said. It is meant to be negotiated. You're feeding on them. I am balancing. Lily's jaw tightened. Children aren't balance. The figure shifted slightly closer. The air around it cooled further. Anchors must be renewed, it said. The firstborn sustain the membrane. Without them, the tear widens uncontrollably. Images flashed again, recent ones. The fissure in Grace's living room floor. The shimmer in the forest. The crack in the church ceiling. The tear is not my doing, the entity continued. It is yours. Lily felt the accusation settle like weight. What did we do? She asked. Your grandmother hesitated. The word struck harder than she expected. She sought to close the covenant prematurely. The seal weakened but did not break. The membrane thinned. And now? Now the worlds bleed. The church walls trembled faintly, as though responding to a distant pressure. If the covenant is not restored, the entity said calmly, the boundary will collapse entirely. Not this town. Not this state. Entire. A horizonless darkness rippled behind it, suggesting scale far beyond Black Hollow. You're threatening extinction, Lily said. I am describing consequence. She stepped closer despite herself. What do you want from me? The figure's outline sharpened slightly, as if focusing. Acceptance. Continuation. Renewal of the oath. You want my blood. I want your consent. The distinction chilled her more than the demand. You're manipulating fear. I do not need to. The ground beneath her feet began to fracture, not violently, but steadily, fine cracks spreading outward in thin branching lines. You see the instability, it said. Your arrival accelerated it. The anchor recognized its blood. Emma. Release her, Lily said. She is not imprisoned. She is aligned. Anger flared. She's 11. And you are 37, it replied. Age is irrelevant to binding. The cracks widened. Through them she glimpsed movement, shadows pressing upward, thinner than before, testing the weakening barrier. If I refuse? Lily asked. The entity did not hesitate. The membrane tears fully. The dead do not remain separate. What you call hell is not fire. It is proximity. The word lingered. Proximity. The dead and the living interwoven without boundary. No finality. No rest. Just collision. Lily's thoughts raced. Her grandmother had tried to end the covenant quietly, without sacrifice. She had failed. But what if the problem was not the covenant itself? What if it was the asymmetry? You said it requires renewal, Lily said slowly. Blood from the original line. Yes. And if the original line retracts entirely? The entity regarded her carefully. You misunderstand. No, Lily said. I'm beginning to. The altar stone inside the church pulsed brighter. The sigils shifted, reconfiguring slightly, as though responding to new possibility. The covenant binds both sides, Lily continued. Not just ours. Silence. You were invited, she said. That means you accepted terms. The air tightened. You exist here because we allowed it. The shadows beneath the cracks stirred uneasily. You cannot revoke what sustains you, the entity said, tone cooling. Maybe not, Lily replied. But I can redefine it. The ground trembled more violently now. Outside the church, the sky flickered. Somewhere beyond this place, she sensed the living world reacting, Emma's body convulsing, John praying harder, Grace screaming. Time was not linear here. But it was running out there. I won't renew the oath, Lily said firmly. Not as it stands. The entity's form expanded slightly, edges blurring into something far less human. Then you condemn them. No, she whispered. I changed the anchor. The altar stone cracked down its center. The sigils flared white. For the first time, the entity stepped back. What are you attempting? It demanded. Lily felt something awaken inside her, an inheritance not of fear but of knowledge. The bloodline had not only carried obligation. It had carried access. You said the veil is negotiated, she said. The cracks beneath her feet widened fully now, darkness surging upward. Then let's renegotiate. The church collapsed inward. The shadow lunged. And Lily reached for the stone as the world split open around them. The stone was colder than bone. When Lily's palm touched its fractured surface, the sigils did not burn her, they recognized her. Light pulsed outward from the cracks in slow, rhythmic waves, like a second heartbeat answering her own. The shadow surged forward, its form unraveling into something vast and less contained. The edges of its shape no longer mimicked a body. It expanded into a field, pressure without boundary. You do not understand the architecture, it said, voice now layered with discordant undertones. The covenant is load-bearing. Then I'll redistribute the weight, Lily replied. The altar split fully in two. From beneath it rose not fire, not flame, but threads. Countless thin filaments of pale light stretching upward and outward into the darkened sky. Each thread vibrated faintly, humming with quiet resonance. Anchors. She saw them clearly now, each thread tied to a firstborn descendant. Each thread threaded through time, tethering flesh to membrane. Emma's thread glowed brightest. The entity recoiled slightly as Lily grasped one of the filaments. It did not cut her. It tightened around her wrist like living silk. You would bind yourself, it said. Yes. You will not survive the transfer. Survival isn't the point. The ground shuddered violently. Cracks spidered outward through the broken church floor. Beyond the walls, the sky darkened further. Shadows pressing against the weakened membrane from the other side. If the anchors collapse entirely, the entity warned, containment ends. I know. She reached for Emma's thread. It pulsed in her hand, warm and fragile. Through it she felt the girl's heartbeat, frantic and terrified. She felt Grace's sobbing breath. She felt John's prayers breaking against fear. The threads were not just bindings. They were conduits. You sustained yourself through distributed anchors, Lily said, forcing clarity into her thoughts. Generational sacrifice. But the thinning started when my grandmother hesitated. She disrupted equilibrium, the entity said sharply. No, Lily corrected. She weakened your leverage. The entity's shape distorted violently. Horn-like structures sharpened from its silhouette before dissolving again. You mistake dependence for leverage. Do I? She pulled Emma's thread gently toward the split altar stone. Pain shot through her arm. Not physical, structural. As though something inside her were being rewired. The entity moved faster this time, shadows coiling around her legs. You cannot contain what exceeds you. I don't need to contain it, she said through clenched teeth. I need to localize it. The threads began converging. One by one, they reoriented, shifting from dozens of distributed lines toward a single point, her. The altar fragments vibrated violently. You will collapse, the entity said. Then it collapses with me. Outside the broken church, the false sky began tearing invisible seams. Through the rents, Lily glimpsed the living world flickering. Grace's house trembling, John clutching his crucifix, Emma convulsing on the living room floor. Time fractured between realms. You misunderstand the scale, the entity pressed. If you absorb the covenant entirely, the membrane seals only around you. Not around the town. That's the point. Silence fell abruptly. The shadows halted mid-motion. You would isolate the tear. Yes. You would become the threshold. The threads snapped into alignment. They did not sever. They rerouted. All of them. Through her. The sensation was indescribable, cold flooding through marrow, light threading through nerve endings, memory not her own surfacing in waves. Every ancestor who had signed the oath flickered inside her mind, fearful faces, trembling hands, whispered bargains. The covenant rewrote itself. Emma's thread detached. The warmth vanished from Lily's grip. She felt the girl's presence retreat, alive, distant, no longer tethered to the membrane. The entity's voice changed. Less vast. More focused. You anchor the boundary to a single point, it said slowly. You confine access. Yes. You confine me. Yes. The ground beneath them dissolved completely. They stood suspended in a void of thinning light. You will not die, the entity said after a moment. You will endure. I know. Alone. She swallowed. I know. The threads finished binding. The sky sealed. The cracks in the church floor closed in reverse, stone reforming, sigils dimming. The shadows beyond the membrane recoiled as though pressed back by sudden force. In the living world, the fissure in Grace's floor snapped shut. The forest seam vanished. The crack above the altar in St. Bartholomew's resealed as if it had never formed. Emma's body stilled. Her breathing normalized. Grace sobbed in relief. John lowered his trembling hands. But Lily remained where she stood. The church around her stabilized, not restored, but contained. The false town outside grew dim, edges blurring into a boundary that now wrapped tightly around her position alone. You have restructured the covenant, the entity said quietly. Yes. You have removed generational access. Yes. And replaced it with singular containment. She nodded. The entity's form condensed, shrinking from vast field to something closer to human scale, still indistinct, still wrong, but constrained. You misunderstand one consequence, it said. Lily felt the boundary solidify around them, an invisible dome sealing her inside this thinner world. What consequence? You are now the membrane. The word settled slowly. She felt it then. The veil was no longer between realms. It was threaded through her. Every boundary tremor would move through her consciousness first. Every pressure from the other side would register inside her mind. She would feel every test. Every attempt. Every push. You will stand here, the entity continued. As long as your blood persists. My blood ends with me. A pause. Does it? Her thoughts flashed, brief, disorienting. She had no children. No siblings. The Turner line ended with her. The entity tilted its head slightly. Then the membrane ends with you. The boundary around them pulsed once, stabilizing fully. In the living world, sunlight broke faintly through Black Hollow's clouds for the first time in days. Emma opened her eyes and whispered, "It's gone." But Lily understood the truth. It was not gone. It was contained. With her. The church doors closed behind her without sound. The outside world faded to gray. The entity regarded her from a short distance now, no longer pressing against the veil. You chose proximity, it said. Yes. The air settled into stillness. No screaming. No cracking. Just containment. Lily stood at the center of the inverted covenant, heart beating steadily, threads woven through her being like quiet wires of light. The devil did not walk among them. Not anymore. It walked beside her. And the veil no longer tore. It breathed. Containment was not silence. It was pressure. Lily felt it immediately, not as pain, but as weight. The boundary that now threaded through her consciousness did not rest. It flexed, contracted, tested itself in subtle pulses. Every tremor from the other side passed through her like distant thunder traveling along bone. She stood at the center of the false black hollow, this thinned echo of the town, while the entity watched her with new calculation. "You are adapting," it observed. "I don't have a choice." The church around her had stabilized into a skeletal version of its former shape. Walls remained, but the sky above was no longer solid. It resembled stretched fabric pulled too tightly across an unseen frame. Beyond it lay movement. Shapes pressing faintly against the membrane. Not just one. Many. "You are not the only intelligence beyond the veil," Lily said quietly. "No," the entity replied. "But I am the one your ancestors named. And naming you constrained you." Yes. She felt that truth ripple through the boundary. The original covenant had given the entity localized authority, access through invitation. By centralizing the anchor within herself, she had limited that authority to a single fixed node. But something else was happening. The membrane was stabilizing around her, yet thinning elsewhere. Not in Black Hollow. Elsewhere. "You feel it," the entity said. Yes. Small fractures, hairline instabilities, were forming in distant places. Cities she could not see. Regions she could not identify. The distributed anchor system had diffused tension across generations and geography. By collapsing it into herself, she had removed redundancy. She had created a single point of failure. "You have narrowed access," the entity continued. "But you have concentrated strain. Then I'll hold it." "For how long?" She did not answer. Time functioned differently here. There was no sun, no moon. Only cycles of pressure and release. Days. If they could be called that, passed in. Waves of testing. The membrane would tighten as something vast pressed against it, then recoil as her will reinforced the seal. Each attempt etched faint lines across her arms, thin glowing fissures beneath her skin. Not wounds. Stress fractures. She did not sleep. She entered intervals of suspension, hovering between thought and vigilance. In those moments she glimpsed the living world through the thread still faintly connected to her perception. Grace holding Emma close at night. John returning to his pulpit with renewed steadiness. The town slowly resuming its rhythm. Black Hollow endured. But Lily felt something else growing. Awareness. The entity no longer loomed as a towering abstraction. Constrained by the renegotiated covenant, it had condensed further, its form now almost human in proportion, though never fully defined. It did not threaten. It studied. "You expect rebellion," Lily said during one of the quieter cycles. "It is inevitable," it replied. "From you?" "From pressure." Another tremor passed through her. Stronger. She staggered slightly. Beyond the thinning sky, shadows accumulated, not chaotic now, but organized. Patterns emerging. Intelligence gathering at the membrane's weak points. "You were not the architect," Lily said. "You were a participant." "Yes." "Then who designed it?" The entity regarded her without visible expression. "The veil predates language," it said. "It is structural. Between states of being." "Then why does it tear?" "Because consciousness evolves." The statement unsettled her. "Explain." As living minds expand, technologically, psychologically, the boundary is strained. Death was once final because perception was limited. Now your species probes what it does not understand. Her thoughts flickered to experiments in quantum physics, near-death studies, attempts to map consciousness beyond biological death. You're saying we weakened it. I am saying you reached. The membrane convulsed violently. This time the fracture was not distant. It was close. A bright vertical seam split open in the false sky above them, far thinner than the one that had appeared in the forest, but sharper. Through it she glimpsed something not shadow, but light. Not warm. Not benevolent. A brilliance that erased form rather than cast it. The entity recoiled more sharply than it had before. That is not mine, it said. Lily felt cold clarity settle in. You're not the only force negotiating. No. The seam widened another inch. From beyond it came silence so absolute it swallowed even her thoughts. The entity moved closer to her, not aggressively, but urgently. You cannot hold that, it said. What is it? Absence. The word hollowed the air. Not demonic. Not infernal. Erasure. If the first tear had allowed proximity between life and death, this new seam threatened to collapse distinction entirely, not into chaos, but into nullity. Why now? She asked. Because you concentrated the system, the entity replied. You simplified architecture. Simplicity invites binary. The seam pulsed. Her arms lit with fissures. Pain, real this time, shot through her spine. You stabilized one imbalance, the entity continued. You exposed another. The membrane buckled. The false church walls fractured. For the first time since her descent, fear pierced her composure, not fear of suffering, but of miscalculation. She had assumed the primary threat was invasion. She had not accounted for collapse into nothing. You said the veil is negotiated, she said through clenched teeth. With whom? The entity did not hesitate. With awareness. The seam above them expanded sharply. Light poured through, not radiance, but flattening brilliance that dissolved shadow and definition. Where it touched the boundary, threads disintegrated. The entity stepped beside her now. We are both bound to preservation, it said quietly. Though for different reasons. You want existence. Yes. And I want humanity. Those are not mutually exclusive. The seam surged again. She understood then. Her renegotiation had not ended conflict. It had elevated it. By anchoring the veil within herself, she had become the conscious negotiator of all forces pressing against it, not just the one her ancestors had named. You need me, she said. Yes. And I need you. Yes. The light advanced. The membrane thinned to translucence. If absence breached fully, there would be no possession. No torment. No hell. No life. Only flattening void. Lily inhaled slowly. Then we renegotiate again. The entity turned toward her. You would share anchor. Yes. You risk empowerment. I risk extinction if I don't. The seam widened. She reached, not for the threads this time, but for the entity itself. Its surface felt neither cold nor hot. It felt ancient. You were named Devil, she said. But you're not annihilation. No. You're continuity. Yes. Then help me preserve it. For a suspended moment, nothing moved. Then the entity placed its indistinct hand over hers. The boundary flared, not outward, but inward. The threads that bound her alone split once more, not distributed across bloodlines, but across dual consciousness. Anchor became shared. The seam of absence met resistance. Light and shadow collided, not violently, but densely. Pressure stabilized. The fracture narrowed slowly. The false sky resealed inch by inch. When silence returned, it was not oppressive. It was balanced. Lily staggered, breath ragged. The entity stood beside her, not diminished, not dominant, contained within mutual tether. You altered architecture again, it said. Yes. You have become negotiator. She exhaled slowly. I've become the veil. The boundary held. Not fragile. Not invulnerable. Dynamic. And for the first time since the tear began, nothing pressed against it. The pressure did not return. That was how Lily knew it was not over. For what might have been hours, or years, there was equilibrium. The membrane neither strained nor softened. It existed in a state of suspended negotiation, threaded now through two consciousnesses, hers and the entity once named Devil. The false church remained, but it had changed. Its walls were no longer fractured stone, they were semi-translucent planes, faintly luminous, pulsing with slow rhythmic light. The echo town beyond had dissolved into abstraction. No houses. No roads. Only horizonless gray. You feel it, the entity said quietly. Yes. Expectation. She nodded. Equilibrium was not peace. It was a held breath. Far beyond the boundary, across distances no longer measurable in space, the living world continued. She sensed it faintly. Emma laughing again. Grace sleeping without waking in terror. John preaching sermons that no longer trembled. Black Hollow stabilized. But the veil was not local. It was global. And consciousness was not static. The membrane shifted slightly. Not a tear. A ripple. Then another. They're reaching, Lily murmured. The entity did not ask who. They both understood. Elsewhere, minds probed the nature of death, laboratories studying neural continuity, experiments mapping consciousness at the threshold of biological cessation. Near-death reports catalogued. Quantum hypotheses whispered about information persisting beyond matter. Humanity was learning to look. And looking strained boundaries. You cannot forbid curiosity, the entity said. I wouldn't if I could. Another ripple passed. This one carried intention. Unlike the earlier absence, pure erasure, this force was patterned. Organized. Intelligent. It did not press blindly. It examined. Lily felt it studying the membrane like a scientist observing glass. This is new, she said. Yes. The ripple intensified into a narrow filament, no wider than a thread. Probing the boundary carefully. It did not tear. It infiltrated. A fine luminous line passed through the membrane and brushed her awareness. The sensation was not cold or hot. It was analytical. Who are you? The question did not arrive in words. It arrived as structure. The entity beside her stiffened. This is not mine, it said. I know. The filament lingered, mapping the architecture of the veil as though sketching its geometry. You have centralized the threshold. The impression carried neither malice nor compassion. Only comprehension. Another negotiator, Lily whispered. Yes. From the other side of the membrane, vast awareness coalesced, not shadow, not light. Something like distributed intelligence without personality. It had not been summoned. It had observed. You have altered equilibrium twice. The statement vibrated through her. Yes, she answered silently. Your species accelerates. She felt memory flicker, industrial revolutions, digital networks, artificial intelligence, the expansion of collective cognition. Billions of minds linked in instantaneous communication. Humanity was not merely individual anymore. It was aggregate. The filament extended slightly deeper. The entity at her side tightened its presence, reinforcing their shared anchor. This force does not seek possession, it said. It seeks integration. Integration with what? Lily asked. With boundary. The realization unsettled her more than demonic invasion ever had. You will not hold indefinitely, the vast intelligence conveyed. Nothing does, she replied. Evolution requires permeability. The membrane quivered faintly. Permeability invites collapse, Lily countered. Only if unmanaged. The intelligence withdrew slightly, not retreating, but recalibrating. You have chosen stasis. I've chosen preservation. Preservation decays without adaptation. The entity beside her stirred uneasily. This one speaks in systemic terms, it said. Not moral. The filament pulsed once more. The veil will thin by design. Not rupture. Not annihilation. Gradual. Dissolution. Emerging. Lily felt the implication fully. Not demons walking the earth. Not absence erasing existence. But death becoming visible. Accessible. No longer a sealed frontier. You're describing the end of separation, she said. Yes. Human consciousness approaches self-awareness of its continuity. Your boundary cannot remain opaque. The membrane trembled, not violently, but with inevitability. Lily turned inward, examining the architecture she had reshaped. The shared anchor with the entity stabilized localized strain, but it did not address trajectory. Humanity would continue reaching. Technology would continue amplifying perception. Curiosity would not contract. You're saying the veil isn't meant to hold forever, she said. It was transitional. The word echoed. Transitional between what? She asked. Ignorance and integration. Silence expanded. The entity beside her spoke, voice quieter than she had ever heard it. If integration occurs without structure, chaos follows. Agreed, the intelligence responded. Structure must evolve. The filament withdrew fully, but its presence did not vanish. It remained adjacent, observing, patient. The membrane stabilized once more. But differently. It no longer felt like a wall. It felt like skin. Breathing. You cannot stop this trajectory, the entity said. No, Lily agreed. Then what will you do? She closed her eyes, not in fatigue, but in deliberate thought. The covenant her ancestors forged had been born of fear. Her renegotiations had been born of crisis. This next step could not be reactive. It required design. If permeability is inevitable, she said slowly, then it must be guided. By you? The entity asked. Not alone. She sensed humanity's vast neural web, billions of minds, some compassionate, some cruel, most simply unaware of the boundary they pressed against daily. You called me negotiator, she said to the entity. Yes. Then negotiation expands. The membrane responded subtly, threads branching not into bloodlines, but into awareness itself. Not binding. Not sacrificing. Linking. Tiny points of contact formed, faint impressions in receptive minds across the living world. Artists dreaming of luminous thresholds. Scientists intuiting continuity beyond matter. Children describing thin places where reality shimmered. Not possession. Inspiration. The entity regarded her carefully. You risk awakening too many at once. Then I calibrate. The membrane flexed, adjusting permeability like an iris narrowing against light. Gradual. Measured. The vast intelligence beyond did not resist. It observed. This is acceptable, it conveyed. For now. The words carried no threat. Only progression. The boundary settled into its new configuration, no longer a sealed veil nor a torn membrane, but a dynamic interface. Lily exhaled slowly. Black Hollow remained quiet. Grace would never know how close erasure had come. Emma would grow up with only fragments of memory, nightmares softened by time. John would preach about faith restored without understanding its expanded meaning. But the world had shifted. Not catastrophically. Subtly. The entity stood beside her, no longer looming. "What are we now?" it asked. She considered carefully. "Stewards," she said. "Of what?" "Of transition." Beyond the membrane, humanity continued its relentless expansion of knowledge. The veil did not tear again. It thinned. Deliberately, rhythmically, breathing with the evolution of consciousness itself. And somewhere between life and death, between shadow and absence, Lily Turner stood, not as sacrifice, not as victim, but as the living threshold. The devil did not walk among them. Nor did annihilation descend. Instead, the boundary breathed. And for the first time in history, it breathed with them.